How are you? You're good? You had a good meal, good food, right? Good food. When I came to take the food, there was nothing left, so you probably were hungry. So good for you. Welcome to the AngularJS talk. It's good that you joined me today for this talk because what I want you to go out from this talk with is that AngularJS is the best thing ever. So it's good that you chose to be in a room that tells you about the best thing ever, right? Let me introduce myself first, and then we'll just go deep into the session. So my name is Shay Friedman. I am a founder of a company named Code Value. I do consultancy and training and everything that is software related, mainly on web. In the last 3 years, I've been doing almost only AngularJS. And even after 3 years working with the technology, I still love it. So maybe it says something. Just so I know you, how many here are web developers? Almost all of you, cool. How many of you have already played with Angular? Cool. How many of you have Angular in production? Okay, cool, almost none. Hopefully after the talk, all of you will have Angular in production. That's good, that's good. Good. So let's start talking about some overview of the features. So Angular is a single page application framework. Now, single page applications on the web is something that is not really new. It's something that exists for, I guess, about 10 years, something like that. But only in the recent years, like 2 or 3 years, people actually started using this idea and actually implementing frameworks that help you work with this idea. Now, why are we here? Why are we talking about single-page applications? Why do we need them? So what happened is that we had ASP.NET Web Forms, JSP, Classic ASP, PHP, all of these, Ruby on Rails, all of these big, very popular, very successful frameworks. And we had them for a long time. But if you think about the way they were doing stuff, just think for a second, they are weird. What happens? A user comes to the page, asks for the page. Then the server goes, creates the website, the actual HTML that needs to be on the client, and sends the UI to the client. OK, let's say that's OK. And then the user starts doing stuff, clicks a button. There is a new request going to the server. Then the server reruns and regenerates the UI and sends it to the user. Now, if someone told you that about desktop application, that this is how you're doing that, someone would thought you were crazy. Because think about it, the server is a server, or is it creating a UI, or is it creating the entire UI because the UI also has JavaScript? It's a mix and a combination of stuff that just don't mix. And what's happening with single-page application is that we actually move forward or just meet the way we were doing stuff on desktop for a long time. It's a client-server applications. So this is why we need single-page applications. This is just the new name or a different name for client-server applications. And the client is now responsible for the client, and the server is responsible for the server. Makes a lot of sense. And this is why we see a huge shift towards JavaScript development and towards JavaScript frameworks like AngularJS. I can tell you in my company, when we started a company about 5 years ago. And in the first 2 years, I was doing almost only ASP.NET MVC and Ruby on Rails stuff. And then it just stopped. And we started working on a really big AngularJS application about 3 years ago, before it was even the first release. And I'm glad we chose Angular because we chose good eventually. But since then, about 3 years now, all we do in the web division in our company is AngularJS applications. And almost no server-side applications like ASP.NET Web Forms or stuff like that. Just Web API and stuff like that. That is what the endpoint for the server should be. So this is why we need single-page applications, and this is why if you're not doing single-page applications, you will do. Okay, I don't know if it's today, I don't know if it's tomorrow, but in the next few years, you will do this. And we see, because a lot of my projects are migrating applications from Silverlight desktop Flash to AngularJS. And I even have a VB6 migration application project, and it's really fun. VB6 was a good thing 30 years ago, but yeah. Anyway, Angular is a single-page application framework, and it's the one to choose. I call it the one framework to rule them all because it's just everywhere. Let me show you that, because picture speaks louder than the words. I took this today, okay, and it's Google Trends. And this is all the popular client-side frameworks. Let's remove that. And you see AngularJS, React.js, X.js, Backbone.js, Ember.js. These are all the popular ones. Now, the yellow line is X.js. It was really big back in the days because it was the first single-page application framework. However, you can see it's declining from like in the last 4 years, and it's not open source. It costs money. Maybe this is why it's going down. These are all the rest. And this is Angular just there, which is kind of crazy, right? Now, you can say that Angular is actually a Google thing, and Google Trends is a Google thing, so maybe they, do stuff. But, well, I kind of believe it, at least what I see from the demand for Angular developers and projects and stuff like that, this is actually true. Another interesting thing to see is this. Again, from today, all the backend frameworks, ASP.NET, Ruby on Rails, JSP, look how they're going down. Constantly, but surely, going down. And it's not that they are disappearing, but they are changing. They are changing to support the single-page applications, maybe apps of, iPhone apps, Android apps, stuff like that. They are now becoming only the server side with endpoints, and this is why this is happening, because ASP.NET to be something as an endpoint for apps and single-page applications is not the best thing. So people are choosing something different over these frameworks, and they are just starting to decline. And I guess this is going to be even bigger decline moving forward. So Angular is there, and it's very, very big, very, very popular. Very big community. There is Angular for this, Angular for that, and really everything. It is developed by Google. There is, last I heard, about 10 developers in Google working full-time on AngularJS. And of course, there is a big community contributing to the open source project. I think in the last release, there were about 400 contributors to the release, which is a lot of people working on it. And it's used in a lot of places. So if you're thinking, well, I'm going to be the only one, is it only used by startups that are going to hit a dead end in like a few months or something like that? No, a lot of very big enterprises use it. DoubleClick is a very big internal app in Google. They say it's the biggest one written in Angular. This is actually administrates all the ads that you see in Google. This is DoubleClick. A lot of internal Google apps. MSNBC, Virgin America, HBO, Netflix, YouTube, all of these big names have parts of their websites written with Angular. And of course, tons of more enterprises, more startups. Everyone is going to AngularJS, and maybe you too. I don't know. So what we're going to do today, after we understood what Angular is, who is using it, and we know it's a good thing to do that, to work with Angular, what we're going to do is create this thing. Let's do this. OK. We're going to create a task manager application using AngularJS. Now this doesn't work. It's just something just doesn't work. We will make it work until the end of the session. So let's start talking about things that Angular has. So first of all is data binding. How many of you use a framework that gives you the ability to use data binding? OK, about 50%. Well, I didn't have a lot of chances to work with data binding before I used Angular. And I got to say that the feeling is amazing. You know that the feeling of giving life again, or the sunrise after the darkest night of all, or when you're in a party and everybody is dancing around you, and then you just stop and think, well, I'm having the time of my life. You know this feeling? So, data binding. This is what I feel. Really, it's amazing. It's amazing, and once you go data binding, you cannot go back. It's like water. You have to drink water just like you have to use data binding. So beware. You will have to use data binding after you start using it. So just saying. It's really amazing. Not just saying. Anyway, I'll show you just a slight thing about data binding, and we'll see it more when we continue the session. So we have all of this HTML and CSS is just to make it look nice. It doesn't have Angular at all. So in order to add Angular to a page, all you need to do is add a script tag with Angular, right? You download Angular, put Angular there. Now you have to define a module, OK? A module, think about it as a container. It's just something that contains everything your application has. And it has a name. This name, DevWeek 15 demo app, you can name it whatever you want. And once you have the module, you need to say where you want the Angular site to live. Most of the time, you will put it here. So this is how you say, I want the entire page to be controlled by Angular. So let me do that. So you say ng-app, and this is the name of the main module. You can actually put it somewhere in the page, on a div or something like that. So you have some other stuff going on your page, and Angular is managing only a small part. Okay? Most of the time, you will want it to control the entire page, but it can be incorporated into existing sites as well. So this is all I had to do for now. So in order to do data binding, the very basic data binding, let's put an input and put ng-model. Let's call it txt. Let's do that. And let's Whoa, too much. Good. Let's put it 3 times and txt as well. Okay. What it's going to do, it's going to say to Angular, everything that is written inside here, inside this input, put in a variable named txt. When txt changes, show the changes. So this is entirely data bound to txt, and this is also, and this is also, and this is also. But this also only shows txt because you cannot change the text. It just displays text. But these use two-way data binding because you can change it and you can also retrieve it. Okay? Let's see it. So you see these are my 3 text boxes, and when I start writing, this is data binding. Most basic thing about data binding. But this is how you work with it everywhere, and it works like a charm, and we'll see more about it when we go forward with the session. But just remember data binding, because it's a life changer. It's a life changer feature. Yeah, so again, this is a very basic example, but everything is a bit about this this amount of complexity. You know, you just bind something to a variable, and everything just happens. And we'll see more about it when we move forward. Angular is also an MVC application. Now, everything today is MVC. Everything that needs to be cool is MVC. So Angular is MVC, and ASP is MVC, and PHP is MVC, and my dog is MVC because he's cool as well. Everything is MVC. And it's nice because it's a good design pattern. I agree, but it kind of, it's weird because Angular is not just MVC. It's, you can say it's MVC RSFD or something like that. It gets more to the, you can add more characters to the acronym if you want. So the basic is MVC, but there's much more than that. What is MVC? Let's talk about that. So MVC, Model View Controller. The model in Angular is just plain old JavaScript object, or POJO, if you will. When I say POJO, Java developers say, hey, it's plain old Java object. OK. So POJSO, plain old JavaScript object. Just contains data. Controllers are also JavaScript objects, but they have methods. And these methods, they get requests from the user and do something with them. They can call a database, they can do some manipulation, they can do whatever they want. And then they put some object for the view to render the UI. Now, what is the view in Angular? Just HTML. HTML is a great templating system. And what Angular uses it for, it extends HTML, and we'll see that more. It extends HTML and then adds stuff that can, and then it reads the extensions and manipulates the HTML according to the extensions. So the HTML is just a template and not the real output that will be rendered eventually, because what Angular does, it changes it all the time according to the data binding. So let's see how we do that. So MVC. The first thing I want to do is add a controller. So I have the module, let's do this, and I just add a controller to the module. Let's call it main controller. And function scope. Let's do this. OK. So now I have the controller, and I can add stuff to it, and we'll add it in a second. What I want to do First of all, I have here the form, right? This is the form that you can see here. It has a title, description, and add task button. What I want to do, I want to data bind the title. There is a text area here, text area, and the button to the controller so the controller can use it and do stuff with it. So let's add to the input ng-model equals, let's do this so you will see it better. Okay, ng-model, let's call it task title. And the text area, also let's add ng-model task description. Okay, so now they will be bound to these two variables, and I can read them from the controller and use them however I want. The button is a bit different because I need to interact with the user when the user clicks on the button. So here I have something that's called ng-click. And this I tell it run add task when the button is click. Okay? Now this, if you are working with web for a long time, this probably reminds you of something, on-click, right? And back in the days, on-click was the thing, right? You write on-click, and then you write the entire JavaScript code you want inside this on-click attribute, because this is how we used to do it. However, then jQuery came, and they said, no, 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 no. This is behavior, and this is the view. Everything that is behavior-wise, you put in the JavaScript file, and the HTML is just HTML. So we stopped doing that. You will not find on-click or something like that on buttons in jQuery applications. What you will find is IDs, a lot of IDs. So Angular says, OK, good, but this is not really behavior. You're just calling something in the controller. So now it's OK. So ng-click is OK. On-click, no. ng-click is OK. There is no other way, by the way. This is the only way to interact with buttons via the ng-click, or there is a ng-double-click, actually whatever you want. So this is the only way to interact with JavaScript events. So now we have all of this, but we now need to implement a task. Where do we implement it? In the controller. So going back to the controller, we have this scope here. Scope is, you can actually say it's a view model. Okay, if you are familiar with the view model concept, scope is just a view model. They call this scope because they had a different idea in their heads. They had the idea that this scope variable is very similar to function context in like C#, Java, whatever programming language that you want. It's kind of similar to that. This is why it's called scope. Now, this is a very, very weird implementation because it becomes very, very complex. And in my training courses, I think we spent about 3 hours just talking about scope and scope hierarchies and what is the scope because it's so complex. However, if you think about design pattern, this is just a view model because what it does, it connects the controller and the view. Okay? Everything that the view should be familiar with goes to the scope. And everything that the controller if the controller wants to interact with the view, it goes through the scope. You cannot put things on the controller that the view will know. You have to put them on the scope. So, for example, add task, task description, or task title must be on the scope. So let's do that. We don't need to create task title and task description. They will be created automatically because it's JavaScript. You can do whatever you want. And Angular will create them when someone starts writing text. But I need to implement add task. So scope add task equals function. This is how I add the add task function. Now, what I want in add task to do, I want to add it to a task array. So let's create a task array. So you can think about this function, this function as a constructor. So this will run when the controller is initiated. So what we want to do is create a task array. Okay, so this is our task array. All the tasks will go here. So when we add a new task, what I want to do is scope.task.push and add a new task. Now, what I will write here is actually the model, right? The model of that we are using, and this is what's going to describe the task. So let's say it has an ID, and because I don't have a unique identifier here, let's do Pursman unique identifier. This is how I do it. Do not do that in production. Not a good idea. The title is scope.taskTitle because once the user clicks on add, and if the user already wrote something in the title input or the content input, this is going to be filled out. Okay, this is going to have content of what the user actually wrote. So this is task title. Let's add description, scope.task description, good. And that's it. Now let's even be nice to the user and do task title equals nothing and scope.task description equals nothing. So what should happen is that the user clicks on add task, the task is added to the task array, and then task title and task description, the inputs, are going to be cleared out. Now, the last thing I want to do, because right now it's still not going to work, I need to tell Angular where main controller lives, what it actually manages. So the controller actually here controls the entire page. So I can put it here on the class. This is how I do it, ng-controller, and the name of the controller. Why is it like that? Because you can have multiple controllers controlling different parts of your page. Okay, it's definitely a good thing to do. Here, I just need one controller to control the entire page, so I'm good with it. So what's going to happen is that the user is going to go to this task, to here, to this input, write input, to the task title, then write input on the description. Click Add Task. Once the user clicks Add Task, this will go here to the controller, add the task, a new model to the task array, and clean the task title and task description variables. Let's see what we have. Wait, I'm going to remove these because we don't need them anymore. We'll see data binding later. So what we have, if it works, this actually disappears. We don't see anything else because we didn't do anything else. But it actually works, and it's still pretty stupid. No, the user doesn't really see his or her tasks, but they can add tasks until they stop, and they just disappear. It's like it's the greatest task management tool ever. Just add tasks and they disappear. And then you can go home and drink a lot of beer. Good idea, good idea. Let's move forward, and we'll add more later. So HTML. HTML is awesome. I really like HTML. Really, it's a great templating system. However, how many of you know who is this guy? We all should appreciate him and give him a lot of money and a lot of everything that he wants, because this is Sir Tim Berners-Lee. He invented the World Wide Web. This is the reason why we're all here, why we have HTML, why we have the internet, why we have JavaScript, and why we have AngularJS. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. So thank you. He's good, but he invented the World Wide Web like 25 years ago, something like that, 1989. And what he actually wanted, he didn't think this is what's going to happen. He wanted something to share documents. And this is the first browser ever created. It has the original name of World Wide Web. And you can see that it's really nice, very intuitive. And what it does, it shares documents, just shows documents. And if you think about HTML, it shows documents. It's the greatest, probably the greatest programming language ever invented for documents. It just has everything that you need. However, what Tim Berners-Lee never thought about was that we're going to say, OK, good, you did good, but now we're going to create applications with that. No more documents, we're going to create applications. Now let me show you something. TweetDeck. I don't know how many of you know TweetDeck, but it's a really nice web application. You can do that, and you can click on stuff and then go back, and really, really nice. However, you can also do that. Why would you want to do that? Why would you do that, right? This is like, what? 25 years after Sir Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web, we still have the problems because he thought it was going to be used for documents, and we said, no, this is going to be used for applications. Now, this is what we have. Now, if everything was working smoothly, we didn't have jobs, right? So it's good that it's hard, but I really want to make things easier. And this is why I like Angular, because it allows me to do that. And you can actually create new HTML elements and use them. And the first thing I want to show you about that is what Angular comes built in with. And then I'll show you how we create our own HTML, a better HTML, and make Sir Tim Berners-Lee proud. So let's see that. So what we need now here is something that shows the tasks, right? In order to show all the tasks, I need some kind of a repeater, right? And HTML doesn't have a repeater. It doesn't suppose to have a repeater. And Angular adds this idea of repeater into HTML. So this is where the tasks exist, right? Let me remove this task because we have just two simple ones, and we don't need that. Let's do that. Wait. So we have the task title and description. What I can do with Angular is add something called ng-repeat. And then say that for each task in tasks, track by task.id. Now, the track by thingy is an improvement in Angular 1.2 just for performance reasons. It gives it a unique identifier for each line. You don't really have to use it, but it's very, very recommended that you do. So yeah, not going to deep dive into that. Just know that this is how you write it. This should be a unique identifier. So it just, for each task in tasks, repeat this entire template. Cool. Now what we want to do task.title and task.description, right? To show the title and description. And let's see how this works. So now when we start a page, we don't have any tasks. But when I start writing tasks, they are immediately added, right? And this is really cool. Now, just look at that. This is, again, data binding. I just wrote task in tasks. So whoever changes this tasks object, it will change this repeater. Now, in the code, all I do is push models to the tasks array. There is no HTML work inside the controller. And there is no JavaScript work in the HTML. Full separation of concerns. This is a crazy thing, really. Even in really, really big applications and complex applications, you can still manage to have this separation of concerns just like that. And it works perfectly, really. It's amazing, the idea that you just change it here and it works magically inside the HTML. So yeah, let's move on and see more of that, because this is obviously not enough. There is much more. What I want to do, this task management system is good, but I need a way to complete tasks, right? So first of all, let's add to the task model, let's add completed equals false. Okay? And if you pay the paid version, you will have completed equals true. So this is better. But let's start with the free version. Completed equals false. So now, going back here, no, here. Let's add a checkbox so you can check it and uncheck it. Let's go here and add input type checkbox. And again, ngModel equals task.completed. So now this ngModel, this input, let's do, oops, this ngModel is actually bound to the task in this iteration. Okay, so for each task in task array, we'll have a different binding for every single checkbox, right? So we don't overlap each other or something like that. Let's see what happens. Actually, we won't see anything, but now we have this and we can do that. But I want something to look pretty. When I finish a task, I want to be happy. So I want to see green, right? Green is happy. Green is good. So what I also have, I don't have just ngRepeat. I also have something called ngClass, which is data binding for CSS classes. It has this kind of weird syntax, but yeah, just get used to it. And it says, take this name, this CSS class, list group item success. This is the name that Bootstrap has for green. Add this CSS class whenever task task.completed is true. Okay, so we have some kind of expression. So when this is true, this is added to the CSS classes. When this is false, this is removed from the CSS classes for this specific li element. Let's save it and refresh. And now whenever we have a task that is completed, nothing happens, which is great. This is exactly what I wanted. Wait. What we did wrong, ng class list group item success, of course, forgot an S. Half of my life went for typos. True story. Anyway, and now it's green, and you see that it's just for the one that I put as completed. And again, what happens here is entirely based on data binding. I have this task completed here, and what it knows that when I checked the checkbox, it puts true in task.completed. When I check it, it puts false. This is everything that it knows. It doesn't know who cares about task completed. It just knows to change task.completed. ng class has binding to this task.completed. And when it changes, it gets notified that it was changed, and then it knows to add or remove the CSS class. So these are just two of the things that Angular has built in. There are about more than 50, okay, more than 50 of these things, ng-something. For example, ng-show is very, very nice because according to a Boolean expression, it can hide or show elements on the document. So it's really, really nice. If you guys have experience with jQuery, when you see this, I guess you're thinking, wow, that's cool. I needed to write this exact thing with jQuery. Used to have, like, I don't know, about a plus minus gazillion lines of code, right? So it's really, really nice. And you can get very productive very fast, which is also a cool thing about that. But this is not the killer feature. This is nice. But I said HTML is nice, but it's been around for 25 years, and we need a better HTML. And this is the killer feature of Angular, at least in my opinion. Directives. Directives are reusable components. You write a component, and then you can reuse it all over the place. Wherever you want, you have this reusable component, which is a kind of a black box. You can separate it from the rest. Then you can use it wherever you want. Now, let me show you. In one of our projects, we created this infrastructure. This is, well, it's not best, but yeah, well, you can see this. This is actual code written with Angular. This is how it looks after we created an infrastructure of our own that actually, when the developer comes to implement views, all they need to do, they need to use the infrastructure. And they don't write HTML at all. Look at that. We had a view, section, row, all of these layout components that you write like that, and then we take that, and what happens eventually is that they actually become HTML, real HTML. However, the user doesn't need to know, the user, I mean the developer, doesn't need to know to write the right HTML. Because, you know, when you write HTML and you write some kind of a component, and then you test it, and it works, you're like, woo-hoo, and continue. And then there's like at least 10 bugs open immediately. It works on your version of Chrome, but it doesn't work on Internet Explorer or Firefox or Safari or whatever there is more. And of course, IE 6 is out the window, or it takes so much effort to make one component work. And then because you don't have this idea of reusable components on the client, just go to write another page, and then you go through all these things again. And then you become miserable. And then you become irritating. And then you need to go on vacation. Then you lose money. And anyway, this is better. Why is it better? Because you can actually write the component once, go through all of these hell once, write it, make it work on every single development platform, Internet Explorer 6, 5, and then 1 if it's needed, and make it work. And once it works, you can just use it everywhere, and it will work everywhere. And it's not an easy thing to do, but you can do that because you just do it, get done with it, and move forward with your life, which is amazing. So this is just an example. You can see there is a lookup object that goes to the database to show the user values and number and string and list components. That number is, for example, a numeric input. String is a text box, but every single one of them has its own behavior, its own logics. So this is how you write a string. This is an actual code. And this is what you can do with Angular. And we will talk about how you create an Angular project at the end. And infrastructure is one of the things that you want to do before you even start writing your screens. And most of the infrastructure is based on directives. So let's see a directive. Let's write a directive. What I want to do, I want to take this thing with the checkbox and make it a directive. We will make a task directive, or let's call it with a name, a task component that we can use whenever we want to display a task. So just like we created a controller here, let's create a directive. So module.directive. Let's call it task and function. Now this function is a factory function. So it creates, it returns the settings, returns the settings for the directive. Now the first setting for a directive is where it exists. And it's called restrict. Now one of the bad things about this idea, this configuration, is that they could have made it a bit more understandable for humans. But after a while, you become a machine as well, and you understand everything. So just bear with me. Restrict has 3 available options. The first one is A. This is also the default one. And this means attribute, which means you can put this task directive everywhere with attribute named task. Okay, so it can be div, it can be I don't know, span, it can be I for if you want it to be I. Everywhere Angular finds an attribute named task, it will take this directive and put it there. So A is the first possibility. E is the second one, and it says element. What is element? Create a new HTML element. And everywhere this appears, an element named task, you will be able to use this directive. And last but not least is C, which is class. This is the weirdest one, but I saw some implementations for that which makes sense. And this will look for this for the definition for in classes. Okay, everywhere it says a task class, it will put the directive there. It's weird because then you never know if it's a CSS class or a directive, but it does have its own use cases. Kind of extreme, but they exist. So we want to create a new element because this is what we do here. So restrict E. Every directive also has a template of its own because a directive contains CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. Okay, it's a reusable component. So this is where we say this is your HTML. So let's call it task.html, and let's create it. So I'm going to create a new file, and this is not good. Again, task.html, and this is going to be the template for my directive. So the template is actually this. Everything inside the repeater, okay? So this is how it looks like. Looks good. And we have the description, we have the checkbox. Everything is good. Good, so now we don't have anything here, but we still need to finish the definition. Now the next thing here, what we did, we created a reusable component. Now think about reusable components. They have to be isolated from the rest of the page, because if you want to use this reusable component several times in the same page, you cannot have them right on the same variables, because then they just overlap each other. So each and every directive can have an isolated scope, which means it's isolated from the rest of the page. But when it's isolated, it presents another problem, which means we need to interact with the page. We cannot have a reusable component that cannot interact with its surrounding. So what we can do, we can have an exit point from this isolated scope to the outer scope, to the page scope. How do we do that? Say scope. And here we say what the name of the value that we're looking for, and what the data binding type is going to be used. So let's say source. Source is the name, and this is going to contain the task, the object, the task object, because we need the task object in order to display these things here, right? Task the title, task the description, completed, all of these, we need them inside the directive. So source is OK. Now, again, I said that Angular is not very good with the directive definition because it's not very readable. So again, here, in order to say this source has the data binding, the two-way data binding, so everything that it changes inside the directive affects the outer scope and vice versa. So two-way data binding is like that, with an equal sign. There is also one-way data binding and callback data binding. But again, this is for a longer session. So this says two-way data binding. Let's go back here. And now we want to use this directive. So what I can do is just use it, right? This is a new HTML element. And now I can say source, because this is what I wrote inside. This is the exit point. Your source, the task source, is task here. What is task here? it's the task of the iteration. Okay? So inside the directive, it's going to be called source. Outside, it's just the current iteration's task. Now, the last thing I need to do here, because I already have this, inside the template, now it's not called task, it's called source, right? So source and source, okay? Because inside the directive, this is now called source, okay? But outside the directive, it's called task, which is okay. It can be called whatever you want. Also source, it's not like a keyword, something, right? Whatever name that you want. You can have multiple of these. And again, different kinds of data binding. Let's see if that works. And then I'll talk more. So yeah, so now you can see this is actually coming from the directive. And this also works. Now this is interesting because what's happening here when I click it? The input is here. It's inside, right? It says source.completed. However, the ng class, the one that changes the classes and put the green on the li, is outside, right? This is the task, and this is the ng class. Now, what's happening when I do two-way data binding? I say source equals task. Whenever something inside source changes, it changes the task outside. And because it changed the task outside, ng class gets notified and changes the CSS class accordingly. So this is the way it interacts with each other. Last but not least about that, we saw only the template, the HTML template, but we can also have what's called link function, which is actually the behavior. So this gets the scope, the element, and the attributes. And here, we don't really need it in this directive, but here you will write the JavaScript code for your directive. So you have the JavaScript, you have the HTML, and the HTML can have CSS as well. So you have a reusable component, can use it multiple times in the page. And let's even do that with a task. Let's say I want to present to the user the first task that he has. So let's take this here. Div. Good. So now I can put here task and say source is tasks 0. Angular, when Angular sees something that is undefined, because when it starts, when the page loads, there is nothing in 0. It just says, OK, you probably meant that. I'm just going to continue like everything as usual. It does have a slight problem when you do something like this, and you didn't really mean it. It takes hours of your life to find these typos. Yes, hours that cannot be retrieved again. But yes, this is a small price to pay for greatness. So now I want to show the first task that we have. Let's do like this, first task. And you see it's right there, still nothing in there because there's nothing to show. But when I have a first task, so you can see it's right there. And the cool thing is now that everything is data bound. So when I click here, it actually changes this. And when I click here, it changes this. This is data binding. Again, data binding is such a great thing. Life changer, life changer. And again, I have a few projects with tons of components and scopes and directives and everything runs at the same time. Things are retrieved from the database asynchronously all the time. And everything is just works and depends on data binding. Amazing. What can we say? Just, I guess when you get out of this talk, someone tells you, well, what do you think about Angular? Data binding. Yes, this is data binding. What is, I don't know, data binding is good. Yeah, it is good. It is good. Anyway, so you can see what we did here. We have a reusable component. We can add binding to it. And we can actually create an entire page using directives if we have the right directives. So killer feature. Really, this is the killer feature of Angular, at least for me. And it changes the way you write applications, at least from my experience. Now, when I said Angular was not just MVC, so we saw the directives already. There is routing as well, we didn't talk about. We talked about scope, which is actually a view model. Angular also has services. And this is what's cool about Angular. It's a full-blown framework. It gives you everything. It tells you, you put this there and that there. Sorry. And this is the way you do it. So you don't need to think too much where to put stuff. Because when you think too much where to put stuff, this is when things become chaotic. Not because this guy is less experienced or this guy is better at his job. This is the way things work. If you can prevent people from thinking, you will have a better quality product at the end. So this is what's good about Angular. It just tells you, this is you put here, this is you put there, and that's it. And services is where you put all the logics, everything that is not UI related. So the controller has everything that is related to the UI. Everything that you need to do on the scope will go to the controller. Whenever you have some logics, like going to the database, going to the web service, doing some calculations, doing some asynchronous jobs, something like that, all of this will go to a service. So what happens is you have the UI, the user clicks on a button, which is data bound to something on the scope, to a function on the scope. The function on the scope runs inside the controller. This function calls a service or multiple services. They do what they do. The controller gets back the data, changes it, put whatever it needs to put on the scope, and the UI re-renders. Okay? This is how things flow inside Angular. Now here, what we can do in our task system, we can add a load and save buttons to save and load the tasks. So let's do that. Let's add the buttons first. This is the best. We have buttons. Buttons are good. OK, so let's add 2 buttons. Button 1, let's do class. btn primary. Button 1 will do load, and button 2 will do save. So let's add ng clicks to both of them. Ng click load, and ng click save. So now we have that. Now we need to create something on the controller to load and save the tasks. So what usually, this is maybe the most popular way of abusing Angular, is doing this stuff in the controller. If you do something like saving, loading stuff from the database or from somewhere, someplace, in the controller, you're doing it wrong. If you're working with HTML inside your controller, you're doing it wrong. Okay, there are places for that. Not inside the controller, though. So here, let's start doing it from here. So scope.load function, and scope.save. Good. Now I want to create a service that allows me to save and load data. Now, we were going to create a local storage, which is something from HTML5 that you can just save stuff on the client and use it afterwards. And this is exactly what services do. They persist data. They call the server. They do stuff that is not related to the UI. So model.service, let's call it data saver, because it saves data. And it's a function. And let's do return, because I don't really need a real class here. And it will have two functions, load and save. And let's even do it generic. So load will get a key where to load it from. And save will also get a key, but the object as well to save. So here, local storage, this is how you interact with local storage. Key, this is the key that you got. And put the object in. Now, local storage is, you can save everything there, but just as strings. Okay, it just, if you save an object, it will just put something like this, object. I don't know if you ever saw that object. But this is not what you want, right? You want the actual object. So what you need is to deserialize and serialize your object. So for that, JSON.stringify, which is probably, stringify, probably the method with the coolest name ever, stringify. What are you doing now? I'm stringifying stuff. Yeah, very, very cool. And now in the load, we want to deserialize it. So, and you would think stringify is a really cool method name, but here it just parse. Like there were two employees doing that. One was really cool. They said, stringify, and the other one like, I'm tired. Let's just do parse. So, sorry, not key, local storage, key. That's it. So now I have a generic data saver that saves and loads data from the local storage, which is awesome. And let's use this for saving and loading our task data. So in order to use it, something that I didn't mention is that Angular uses heavily uses dependency injection. What it means is that you never initialize objects. For example, we created a service. You will never initialize it yourself. You will not have new something in your code. What you will have, you will ask Angular to get it from its injector process. How do you do that? Just put it here. This is the simplest way. Maybe it's not the recommended one, because this will not work when you minify JavaScript. But there are more complex ways to just say these are the services that I want. But this is the simplest way, and it works. What Angular does, yes? Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Yeah, exactly. What it does, it just goes to, when Angular goes and creates the controller, it goes and says, OK, I have $scope, which is a built-in service from Angular. And data server, what is data server? It goes, oh, this is data server. I'm going to create an instance of data saver and put it here, OK? And then you get the instance itself. You will never create a new instance. You get the new instance. This is very, very good when you write unit tests or end-to-end tests, and you want to mock your objects. When you get used to do that this way, to use dependency injection, again, it becomes something that you must do. Even when you're not doing Angular, just look for dependency injection frameworks and use them, because it makes so much sense and it's so much easier because you can also change the implementation very, very easily and stuff like that. Angular comes with it built in. So this is the simplest way to do that. So now we will have data server here. So all we have to do is implement load and save. So in load, what we want to do is scope.tasks equal datasaver.load. And let's say the key is tasks. OK, so this is load. Sorry, here. And save will be the same, just the opposite. So datasaver.save. And the key is, oops, this should have been tasks. Tasks, and the object is scope.tasks. So what is going to happen? I have the buttons right here, right? With ng-click load and ng-click save. Let's say I click save. What happens is that inside the controller, that data saver is already there because it was initialized by Angular. So I have the instance. So when I click save, it goes here and say, OK, datasaver.save. It takes the current current scope.tasks instance and sends it here. And what happens here, it's just being serialized into and saved into local storage with the key named tasks. And when I load it, same thing, just the opposite. So let's see if this works. So I have load and save here. Let's save some stuff first. Let's do this and save. Let's refresh. And what should happen, when I click load, you can see it's right here. You can see that it also data bound, right? Again, data binding. This is green because this was completed, right? So this is already checked. Everything just works as it used to be. And this is the cool thing. This was my aha moment, you know? When I started doing data binding, I figured out, wait, if I want to save my current situation, my current session, save it, and then load it, it's like this, because I just need to save all my scope somewhere, then take it back from somewhere, and put it as the scope. And when I put it there, everything works with data binding, and it just gets back to what it was. And it's amazing, really. So this is services. So until now, we saw services, so directives. We saw the HTML, ng-repeat, ng-class, the data binding. We saw all of that. And these are the main building blocks of Angular. And with them, you can create every application that you want. And again, I've done some very, very complex applications with Angular. Very, very simple applications with Angular. Everything is more or less the same, because what you do, create directive, create the services that you need, create the infrastructure that you need, and then move on from there. Let's talk about some miscellaneous stuff that will wrap up the picture. Learning curve. Angular is kind of tricky because you saw the session, you can go home, go to the office, and start doing that immediately. The problem is that you need to know a lot of stuff. And when you start, you think you know everything that you need. However, what happens is that you start and you become productive very, very fast. However, about a month or 2 months into the work, you either need to rewrite everything or refactor everything, which is not very good, because there's a lot of things that you learn from experience that you don't need to do that, and you must not do that. But it's just there, you can use. No, you do not do that, because if you want your application to be robust and to be, you want to be able to maintain it, you must not do certain things. So my suggestion to you, when you start doing Angular, start working with it a bit, do some POCs, proof of concepts, feel it. Then take a course, an online course, an in-house course, a public course about Angular. I'm training, by the way. But no, really, just take a course, because it's very important to understand how Angular works, because then it makes sense. Like, it's very, very easy to create performance problems in Angular, like that. I have an entire session, not here, but I have an entire session just I'm creating performance problems and fixing them on stage. Really, really easy. And you just need to know a few things, a few basic things, to not do these things that cause performance problems. And there is much more into that. So training courses, I think, is a must. Some mentor or someone with experience in Angular is also very, very helpful. Get someone from outside, get a consultant, hire someone who has experience with Angular to your team, because you will need someone to ask questions. And if you don't have this guy or gal, and you just figure out what to do, it usually ends up with a big refactoring process. So beware of that. So the learning curve is tricky, because it's like this, and then it's like, it's like this, and then it's like this, and then it's like this, and it's just tricky. Third-party components. What I want to say here, Angular is so big, a lot of people use it. There is an Angular wrapper for each and every third-party component that you ever heard of, or even if there's some guy, he's done like this tiny component, and no one uses it except from him and his mother. There is an Angular wrapper for that, because someone did that. It's amazing, really. It's crazy. However, there are wrappers that do not worth your time. Okay, so check them. It might save you a lot of time. So check the third-party wrappers first. See that they answer what you need. If they don't meet your requirements, do not be afraid to write your own wrappers. And by writing a wrapper, I mean creating a directive that wraps the component. It's really easy, and usually it's even better eventually, because you control it, you know what you need, and you create the component that you need, and not a wrapper that gives you everything and no one knows how to use. So don't be afraid of writing your own wrappers. This is what I want to say here. Migration. Something that, again, I've been doing for a long time, various different systems. I got to say, when you have a system, if you have if you're working on desktop applications now, you will probably migrate to the web in the next year or so. Really, I'm pretty sure this is what's happening. I can see that. Everywhere, everyone is doing that. When you migrate from something that wasn't a web application, please, please, please take a designer and a user experience expert before you start the migration. I saw projects failing because they said, OK, this is this application. Take this and put this on the web. And it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Please, please, please. It doesn't relate to anything here. Just take someone to just take someone who knows their stuff about the web and how to take something that was on the desktop and convert it to run on the web. But anyway, when you have all of this concept and you know what you want to do, first of all, learn yourself, take your entire team, take everyone to learn Angular. I don't care how. Like a course or a hackathon, whatever. Learn Angular. Once you are kind of feel safe with Angular, feel you understand where everything should go, create an infrastructure. It takes about 2 weeks to a month, usually, to create the basic infrastructure that everyone can use. Once you create this basic infrastructure, you can start implementing the screens that you have. And when you have, it's a continuous development, right? You create the basic infrastructure, and you continue to add more and improve this infrastructure, but you create the screens at the same time. So it doesn't have to be perfect when you start working with the infrastructure. But infrastructure is a very, very important thing. I saw this happening. I saw this work in very big applications. It changes the productivity of how people work with Angular in such a way that it's a waste not to do that. Just a waste. So yeah, when you start, you can decide whether you want a very, very extensive infrastructure or just a small infrastructure. It's OK. But create something. Create the reusable components that everybody's going to use. Because otherwise, you're going to have a chaos and probably a rewrite after a year or two. How many of you here need to work with IE6? Oh, shit. Sorry. IE8? Yeah. Well, Angular, even Google, actually. Angular 1.2, which is not the latest version. Angular now is 1.3. 1.3.14 or something like that. 1.2 is the last version that supports IE8 and IE7 and IE6. So this is something that you need to take into consideration, that if you need to support IE6, 7, and 8, you must stay with Angular 1.2. If you don't have these constraints, and I wish you to not have these constraints ever, then you can use Angular 1.3 and up. Okay? They're not going to support IE8 or less never again. Okay? So it's not going to happen. 1.2, there is, I think the last version is 1.2.28 or something like that. This is it. And the rest after that does not support IE8 and below. By the way, Gmail doesn't support IE8 as well. So they kind of line up on the same requirements. So you need to just know that. Firefox and Chrome, everything works okay, but IE is an issue and something that you need to know. Angular 1.2, everything I showed you works on Angular 1.2. But on 1.3, they added, they improved the performance, they did some work. 1.4 will have more stuff, 1.5 will have more stuff. And Angular 2.0, which is the next bullet, is going to be a big change. So this is just know that all browsers suck, and Internet Explorer in general is bad. But this is why, I don't know if you know, but Microsoft is retiring Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer is no more. Spartan is the new browser, and Internet Explorer is not going to leave anymore. So I hope this is going to be forgotten in the history pages, and we will not see it anymore. But as I learned in web development, this is not that easy. So yeah, this is the constraints with all browsers. Now, Angular 2.0. It's a breaking version, which means it breaks everything. What Google says, they say they want Angular to continue and improve and be in the same line with the new stuff that the web offers, like web components and stuff like that. So they said Angular 2.0 is going to be very, very different. So they removed a few of the concepts that Angular 1.x has. So it's not a very, very big difference, but you will have to migrate, and this migration might take time. I say and this is the thing. When I said take someone to your team with experience with Angular, take someone to your team with experience with Angular that knows Angular 2.0 and knows how to prepare for Angular 2.0. Because if you write correctly and you write your application thinking about how you will migrate to Angular 2.0, it will take much less time than otherwise. Angular 2.0 is expected to be released the end of the year or sometime first quarter next year. But you never know. It's an open source project. They can say it will take more than that. I don't think you should wait for it. It's not this big of a deal to halt all your production code and wait. However, when you do write new applications with Angular, think about Angular 2.0, because if not, you will have a hard time going forward. Okay, and you will want to go forward. So this is Angular 2.0. There's a lot of material now on that, because about 2 weeks ago, something like that, ngconf took place. So they said everything they know and everything they have, they shared about Angular 2.0. So you can look for that on the internet. You can actually download Angular 2.0 and play with it. So take this into consideration. Okay, the question was, Angular 2.0 is what they say is that it works with TypeScript. TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. And in the last two and a half years, I've been working with TypeScript, almost only with TypeScript, because I find it much more easier to work in a team with TypeScript. I usually do migration projects, and these migrations come from C#, Java, stuff like that, and the developers are not very familiar with JavaScript, so they feel much better with TypeScript. So I see it as a good thing because, again, we chose TypeScript about 2.5 years ago, and we chose correctly. So I would go with that. For me, it's a no-brainer. You just start a new project, TypeScript. Whether you work on a Windows machine or Mac machine, we do both with TypeScript, and it works great. Very recommended, at least for me. OK, so all the slides and all the demos, the demo code is here. I think we're done. Yeah, we don't have time for questions. So if you have any questions, you want to ask me something, you want to ask me if I can help you, if whatever you want, my shoe number, whatever, just come to me afterwards, send me an email. Let me wait here. This is the link, OK, so you can take this. This is my email. This is my Twitter account. Send me questions. I'm here for you, and I'll be glad to help. Have a great conference, and I'll see you around. Thank you. People actually started using this idea and actually implementing frameworks that help you work with this idea. Now, why are we here? Why are we talking about single-page applications? Why do we need them? So what happened is that we had ASP.NET Web Forms, JSP, Classic ASP, PHP, all of these, Ruby on Rails, all of these big, very popular, very successful frameworks. And we had them for a long time. But if you think about the way they were doing stuff, just think for a second, they are weird. What happens? A user comes to the page, asks for the page. Then the server goes, creates the website, the actual HTML that needs to be on the client, and sends the UI to the client. OK, let's say that's OK. And then the user starts doing stuff, clicks a button. There is a new request going to the server. Then the server reruns and regenerates the UI and sends it to the user. Now, if someone told you that about desktop application, that this is how you're doing that, someone would thought you were crazy. Because think about it, the server is a server, or is it creating a UI, or is it creating the entire UI because the UI also has JavaScript? It's a mix and a combination of stuff that just don't mix. And what's happening with single-page application is that we actually move forward or just meet the way we were doing stuff on desktop for a long time. It's a client-server applications. So this is why we need single-page applications. This is just the new name or a different name for client-server applications. And the client is now responsible for the client, and the server is responsible for the server. Makes a lot of sense. And this is why we see a huge shift towards JavaScript development and towards JavaScript frameworks like AngularJS. I can tell you in my company, when we started a company about 5 years ago. And in the first 2 years, I was doing almost only ASP.NET MVC and Ruby on Rails stuff. And then it just stopped. And we started working on a really big AngularJS application about 3 years ago, before it was even the first release. And I'm glad we chose Angular because we chose good eventually. But since then, about 3 years now, all we do in the web division in our company is AngularJS applications. And almost no server-side applications like ASP.NET Web Forms or stuff like that. Just Web API and stuff like that that is what the endpoint for the server should be. So this is why we need single-page applications, and this is why if you're not doing single-page applications, you will do. Okay, I don't know if it's today, I don't know if it's tomorrow, but in the next few years, you will do this. And we see, because a lot of my projects are migrating applications from Silverlight desktop Flash to AngularJS. And I even have a VB6 migration application project, and it's really fun. VB6 was a good thing 30 years ago, but yeah. Anyway, Angular is a single-page application framework, and it's the one to choose. I call it the one framework to rule them all because it's just everywhere. Let me show you that, because picture speaks louder than the words. I took this today, okay, and it's Google Trends. And this is all the popular client-side frameworks. Let's remove that. And you see AngularJS, React.js, X.js, Backbone.js, Ember.js. These are all the popular ones. Now, the yellow line is X.js. It was really big back in the days because it was the first single-page application framework. However, you can see it's declining from like Hello. How are you? You're good? You had a good meal, good food, right? Good food. When I came to take the food, there was nothing left, so you probably were hungry. So good for you. Welcome to the AngularJS talk. It's good that you joined me today for this talk, because what I want you to go out from this talk with is that AngularJS is the best thing ever. So it's good that you chose to be in a room that tells you about the best thing ever, right? Let me introduce myself first, and then we'll just go deep into the session. So my name is Shay Friedman. I am a founder of a company named Code Value. I do consultancy and training and everything that is software related, mainly on web. In the last 3 years, I've been doing almost only AngularJS. And even after 3 years working with the technology, I still love it. So maybe it says something. Just so I know you, how many here are web developers? Almost all of you, cool. How many of you have already played with Angular? Cool. How many of you have Angular in production? Okay, cool, almost none. Hopefully after the talk, all of you will have Angular in production. That's good, that's good. Good. So let's start talking about some overview of the features. So Angular is a single-page application framework. Now, single-page applications on the web is something that is not really new. It's something that exists for, I guess, about 10 years, something like that. But only in the recent years, like 2 or 3 years, in the last 4 years, and it's not open source, it costs money. Maybe this is why it's going down. These are all the rest. And this is Angular just there, which is kind of crazy, right? Now, you can say that Angular is actually a Google thing, and Google Trends is a Google thing, so maybe they, do stuff. But, well, I kind of believe it, at least what I see from the demand for Angular developers and projects and stuff like that, this is actually true. Another interesting thing to see is this, again, from today, all the backend frameworks, ASP.NET, Ruby on Rails, JSP, look how they're going down. Constantly, but surely, going down. And it's not that they are disappearing, but they are changing. They are changing to be, to support the single-page applications, maybe apps of, iPhone apps, Android apps, stuff like that. They are now becoming only the server side with endpoints, and this is why this is happening, because ASP.NET to be something as an endpoint for apps and single-page applications is not the best thing. So people are choosing something different over these frameworks, and they are just starting to decline. And I guess this is going to be even bigger decline moving forward. So Angular is there, and it's very, very big, very, very popular. Very big community. There is Angular for this, Angular for that, and really everything. It is developed by Google. There is, last I heard, about 10 developers in Google working full-time on AngularJS. And of course, there is a big community contributing to the open source project. I think in the last release, there were about 400 contributors to the release, which is cool. A lot of people working on it. And it's used in a lot of places. So if you're thinking, well, I'm going to be the only one, is it only used by startups that are going to hit a dead end in like a few months or something like that? No, a lot of very big enterprises use it. DoubleClick is a very big internal app in Google. They say it's the biggest one written in Angular. This is actually administrates all the ads that you see in Google. This is DoubleClick. A lot of internal Google apps. MSNBC, Virgin America, HBO, Netflix, YouTube, all of these big names have parts of their websites written with Angular. And of course, tons of more enterprises, more startups. Everyone is going to AngularJS, and maybe you too. I don't know. So what we're going to do today, after we understood what Angular is, who is using it, and we know it's a good thing to do that, to work with Angular, what we're going to do is create this thing. Let's do this. OK. We're going to create a task manager application using AngularJS. Now, this doesn't work. It's just something just doesn't work. We will make it work until the end of the session. So let's start talking about things that Angular has. So first of all is data binding. How many of you use a framework that gives you the ability to use data binding? OK, about 50%. Well, I didn't have a lot of chances to work with data binding before I used Angular. And I got to say that the feeling is amazing. You know that the feeling of giving life again, or the sunrise after the darkest night of all, or when you're in a party and everybody is dancing around you, and then you just stop and think, well, I'm having the time of my life. You know this feeling? So, data binding. This is what I feel. Really, it's